He kicked it, my laundry basket, not hard enough to break it, just hard enough to make a point. The plastic slid across the floor and bumped into their coffee table with a dull sound that felt louder than it was. And then everything stopped. No TV noise, no phone tapping, no one breathing normal. I was sitting on the couch folding clothes, my grandson's shirts, a few towels. I'd been helping all morning because my daughter said she was overwhelmed. Then my son-in-law Darren stood right in front of me. He looked down at the basket like it didn't belong there. And he said it, clear and sharp, "Stop acting like you live here." That was it, no yelling, no curse words. Just enough to cut. I looked up at my daughter Tessa. She was standing at the kitchen counter, phone in her hand. She didn't look at me, not even for a second. She stared at her screen like if she didn't move, the moment would pass on its own. That hurt more than what he said, because when your own child won't meet your eyes, you already know where you stand. My face felt hot, my chest felt tight. I could hear my heart beating in my ears, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue, I didn't remind him how many times I'd helped them. How many mornings I showed up early. How many nights I drove home tired. I stayed quiet, I folded the last towel, set it neatly on the pile. I stood up slowly, picked up my keys from the side table. My hands were steady even though I didn't feel steady inside. Darren watched me like he expected something. Tears, anger, an apology, he didn't get any of that. I looked at Tessa one last time, still nothing. No eye contact, no words, just silence that told me everything. So I walked to the door. Behind me, Darren let out a small laugh, like this was all dramatic. Like I was the problem for leaving. I didn't turn around. I opened the door, stepped outside, closed it quietly. When the door shut, I stood there on their porch for a moment, holding my keys so tight they dug into my hand. I took one breath, then another. My name is Marilyn, I'm 57. And before I go on, tell me where you're watching from. And subscribe if you like real stories about quiet disrespect, hidden control, and consequences that don't come from yelling, they come from timing. From paperwork, from things people forget to think about because what happened next didn't happen right away. It happened after I went home. Now rewind with me a bit, 6 weeks earlier, because this didn't start with a laundry basket. It started with a simple request from my daughter, a favor. "Mom, can you help us out for a little while?" She sounded tired, stressed, almost scared. I said yes without thinking. What I didn't notice back then was Darren's smile. Not a happy smile, a quiet one, like someone who just realized they could push a little more and no one would stop them. I didn't see the warning signs, not the way my daughter started avoiding my eyes. Not the way Darren acted like my help was expected, not appreciated. I ignored the small comments, the sighs, the looks. And that's how I ended up on their couch, folding laundry that wasn't mine right before a stranger would later show up at their door asking for access. And that's when everything changed. 6 weeks earlier, none of this felt dangerous. It felt temporary. Tessa called me one evening after dinner. Her voice was tired, like she'd been holding things in all day. "Mom, can you help out for a little while?" she asked. "Just until we get back on our feet." She didn't cry, she didn't explain much, but I could hear the strain, so I said yes. I started coming over a few times a week, mostly mornings. I'd help with the baby so she could shower. I'd throw in a load of laundry, straighten the kitchen, normal stuff, the kind of help mothers give without thinking twice. At first, Darren didn't say much. He was polite but cold, short answers, tight smile. Always moving past me like I was in the way, even when I wasn't. I told myself he was stressed. Work, bills, new baby. I made excuses for him because it was easier than admitting the truth. Then I started noticing the looks. The way his eyes followed me when I opened cabinets. The way he paused when he came home and saw my shoes by the door. Once I heard him mutter, "She's here again." like he didn't realize I was still in the hallway. I froze. But I didn't confront him, I stayed quiet. Tessa changed too slowly. She used to sit with me while I helped, we'd talk, catch up, laugh a little. Now she stayed busy, always cleaning something that was already clean. Always checking her phone, always standing with her back half turned toward me. Sometimes, before answering a question, she'd glance toward Darren first. That part bothered me, but I still showed up. Because when your daughter asks for help, you don't measure how welcome you are. You just help. A couple weeks in, something small happened that stuck with me. I reached into my purse for my spare key. It wasn't there. I searched again, slowly. Carefully, gone. Later that day, Tessa mentioned it like it was nothing. Darren thinks it's better if we keep the keys ourselves now, she said. Her voice was flat, she didn't look at me. I nodded like it was fine, but it didn't feel fine. After that, the rules changed without being said out loud. I should text before coming over, I should come later in the day. Maybe only when Darren wasn't home, so I adjusted, I always adjusted. That's how I ended up folding laundry on their couch weeks later, trying not to take up space. Trying not to cross lines no one had explained. What I didn't know back then was that something else was already happening in the background. Something official, something with dates, names, and access permissions. And when it finally came to the surface, it wouldn't come from me. It would come from someone knocking on their door, asking questions no one there was ready to answer. By the third week, I could feel it every time I walked into their house. That tension. The kind that sits in the air, thick and quiet, like you're always one wrong move away from upsetting someone. I started paying attention to things I hadn't noticed before. How Darren never said my name. How he talked around me, not to me. How he'd ask Tessa questions about the house while standing right next to me like I wasn't there. Did we pay the water bill? Did you tell them about the garage issue? Them, never me, even though I was the one home during the day, the one answering calls, the one signing for packages. I kept my mouth shut. I told myself I was imagining it. Then one morning I showed up a little earlier than usual. Tessa had texted me the night before asking if I could come by around 8. The baby had been fussy all night, so I did. I let myself in with the temporary code she'd given me after taking back the spare key. The house was quiet, too quiet. Darren was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open, coffee untouched, jaw tight. He looked up when he heard me, didn't say good morning, didn't smile, he just glanced at the clock on the microwave. "You're early," he said, not angry, not friendly, just flat. I started, then stopped myself. Tessa asked me to come. He stared at me for a second longer than necessary. Then he said, "Next time wait until she's awake," and went back to his screen. That was it. No argument, no raised voices. But something shifted in me right then, because that wasn't a request. It was a reminder. You are a guest here. You are here because we allow it. Don't forget that. I helped with the baby that morning, but Tessa barely spoke. She kept apologizing under her breath like she was responsible for the air being wrong. "Sorry," she whispered once when Darren walked past. I didn't know what to say to that, so I smiled and told her it was fine. Later that week, I noticed the laundry room door locked. That had never been locked before. I stood there for a moment, basket in my arms, staring at the handle like I was missing something. When I asked Tessa about it, she hesitated. "Oh, Darren just wants to keep things organized," she said. Organized, that word again. It started showing up everywhere, which cabinets I used, where I set my purse, which days I came over. Everything needed to be organized, controlled. By the end of that week, I started bringing less with me. No extra shoes, no sweater to leave on the chair, no mug in the sink. I made myself smaller. Easier. What I didn't realize was that while I was shrinking myself to keep the peace, Darren was doing something else entirely. He was making changes, quiet ones, changes that didn't need my permission. And the first real sign of that came the day a letter arrived in the mail addressed to the house, but not to anyone I expected. The letter showed up on a Tuesday, plain white envelope, no logo, no bright colors. Just thick paper and a typed address. I noticed it because it wasn't mixed in with the usual mail. Darren had placed it neatly on the kitchen counter, off to the side like it mattered more than the rest. I didn't touch it. I never touched mail that wasn't mine, but I looked at the name. It wasn't Tessa's, it wasn't Darren's either. It was a company name I didn't recognize. And underneath it, in smaller letters, was something that made my stomach tighten. Property Access Review. I kept my face calm. Tessa came into the kitchen a few minutes later, hair pulled back, baby on her hip. She followed my eyes to the envelope. Her hand paused for half a second. Then she picked it up quickly and slid it into a drawer, too quickly. "Just junk," she said. Her voice was light, too light. I nodded like I believed her, but I didn't. That afternoon, while the baby napped, Darren walked through the house with his phone out, taking pictures. The breaker panel, the garage door, the side gate. When he noticed me watching, he stopped. "What?" he asked. "Nothing," I said. And I meant it. I wasn't accusing him of anything. I was just watching. He gave me a tight smile. "We're just fixing a few things around here," he said, trying to get ahead of stuff. Ahead of what he didn't say. Over the next few days, more little things changed. A new lock on the side gate. A keypad added to the garage door. The hallway closet cleared out completely. One evening, I reached for my coat where I usually hung it. It wasn't there. I found it folded and placed on a chair near the front door, like it had been moved on purpose. That night, I lay awake thinking about that envelope, about the locks. About the way Darren kept saying "we" when he talked about decisions. But it didn't feel like we included everyone in the house. The next morning, I arrived to find Darren already gone. Tessa looked exhausted. While I fed the baby, I asked gently, "Everything okay?" She hesitated. Then she said, "Darren's just under a lot of pressure." I waited. She didn't add anything else, so I let it go. Later that day, another letter came. This one went straight into Darren's hands when he got home. He read it standing by the door, didn't sit down, didn't speak. His jaw tightened. When he noticed me in the living room, he folded the letter and slid it into his pocket. That was when I realized something important. Whatever was happening didn't involve me because they didn't want it to. And that meant it involved me more than anyone was willing to admit. Because you don't add locks and hide letters unless you're protecting something, or trying to keep someone out. By the end of that week, I started preparing myself, not for a fight, for a moment. The kind of moment where people finally say what they've been holding in. I just didn't know yet that when it came, it would happen in front of everyone. And it would start with something as small and as cruel as a laundry basket. By the time the 5th week rolled around, the rules didn't need to be explained anymore. I already knew them. Where I could sit, what I could touch, how long I could stay. Nothing was said out loud, but everything was clear. I showed up less often, not because I was asked to, but because I could feel how tight the space had become. Like the house itself was pushing back. When I did come by, Darren barely acknowledged me, not rude, just distant. Like I was someone who'd overstayed their welcome and should have figured it out by now. Tessa tried to act normal. She'd ask how my drive was, offer me coffee, but her eyes were always tired. And she kept her voice low, especially when Darren was home. One morning, I arrived to help with laundry and noticed something small but sharp. My basket wasn't where I usually left it. I checked the laundry room. Nothing. I finally found it tucked into the garage, empty, sitting behind a stack of boxes. A message without words. I carried it back inside anyway. No comment, no reaction. That afternoon, while I folded clothes on the couch, Darren stood near the hallway watching me. Not openly, just enough to be noticed. You don't have to do that, he said. I looked up. It's fine, he nodded slowly like he was deciding how to phrase something. We're trying to keep things organized, he said. Less clutter. I glanced around the room. Nothing was messy, but I understood what he meant. I was the clutter. Tessa didn't say anything. She stayed in the kitchen, wiping the same spot on the counter over and over. Later that day, I heard Darren on the phone in the garage again. This time, I caught more. No, she doesn't live here, he said quietly. She just helps sometimes. A pause. Yeah, that's changing. I didn't move, didn't breathe. When he came back inside and saw me, his expression didn't change. Like he hadn't just said something that landed hard in my chest. That evening, Tessa walked me to the door. She stood there longer than usual, fingers twisting together. Mom, she said softly, can you start calling before you come over? I didn't react right away. I already do, I said. She nodded. I know, Darren's stressed. There it was again, not a request, a cover. I looked at her face, really looked. She wasn't angry, she was scared. Okay, I said one word. That night at home, I sat in my car for a long time before going inside. I replayed everything, the locks, the letters, the way my things kept being moved, the way Darren spoke about me like I wasn't family. That's when it finally settled in. This wasn't about help anymore. It wasn't even about me being there too much. It was about ownership, about who belonged and who didn't. And when people get that focused on control, they usually forget one thing: houses come with records. Access comes with rules. And when those things start being changed quietly, someone official always notices. I just didn't know yet how soon that notice would arrive. Or that when it did, it would come on a morning when I was doing something as simple as folding laundry, right before everything finally broke open. The morning of the laundry incident started like any other. Too quiet. I arrived just after 9. I texted first like I was told to. Tessa replied with a thumbs-up emoji, nothing else. When I walked in, Darren's car was already in the driveway. That alone put me on edge. Inside, the house felt tight. Clean but not comfortable, like a place staged for photos, not living. Tessa was in the kitchen feeding the baby. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. Thanks for coming, she said softly. I nodded and set my purse down where I always did, or where I used to. The spot was taken. A small thing, but I noticed. I picked it up and moved it to a chair instead. No one said anything. I gathered the laundry from the hallway and took it to the living room, the one place that still had enough space to sit and fold. I told myself to be quick, efficient. Invisible, Darren walked through while I was sorting. He didn't stop, didn't speak, just passed by, phone in hand, jaw tight. A few minutes later, he came back and stood near the doorway. I felt it before I saw it, that look. Like he'd already decided something. You don't need to do that, he said. I know, I replied. I'm almost done. He didn't answer right away. He looked at the basket, then at me, then back at the basket again. That's not necessary, he said. We've got it. His tone was calm, but there was something underneath it, something sharp. I folded another shirt, slowly. I'm just helping, I said. That's when he kicked it, not hard, not violent. Just enough to send it sliding across the floor, plastic scraping, clothes shifting. The sound felt louder than it should have been. Stop acting like you live here, he said. The room went still. Tessa froze in the kitchen. She didn't turn around. Didn't speak, didn't look at me. And that silence told me more than any words could. I didn't react right away. I looked at the basket where it had landed, then at the floor. I felt something settle in me, not anger, clarity. I folded the last item, set it on the couch, stood up, picked up my keys. No sighs, no shaking hands, no scene. I glanced at Tessa. She stayed facing the counter. That was the moment I understood this wasn't just about Darren anymore. It was about what she was willing to allow. I walked to the door. Behind me, Darren let out a small breath like he'd won something. I stepped outside and closed the door quietly, and that should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Because while I was standing on that porch holding my keys, something else was already set to happen. Something Darren had started weeks earlier. Something that didn't care who lived there or who thought they did. By the next morning, someone would show up asking for access. And when that knock came, the confidence in that house would disappear fast. Because control feels solid right up until it's questioned by someone official. I didn't cry on the drive home. That surprised me. I kept waiting for it to hit, at a red light in my driveway somewhere quiet, but it didn't come. What I felt wasn't sadness. It was a calm I hadn't felt in weeks. The kind that shows up after a decision has already been made for you. I went inside my house, set my keys on the counter, and did something I hadn't done in a long time. Nothing. I didn't check my phone right away. I didn't replay the moment out loud. I didn't call anyone to explain. I made tea, sat at my table, let the quiet settle. Around 8 that evening my phone buzzed. A text from Tessa. "Are you okay?" I stared at it for a while. Then I typed back, "I'm fine." That was true. Another message came a few minutes later. "Darren didn't mean it like that. He's just stressed." There it was. The cleanup, the smoothing over. I didn't answer, not because I was angry. Because I was done explaining my place in a house where I no longer had one. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I was halfway through my coffee when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. "Hello," I said. "Good morning," a man replied, calm voice, professional. "Is this Marilyn?" "Yes, my name is Greg. I'm calling regarding the property on Hawthorne Lane, my daughter's address." I sat up straighter. "I believe there may be some confusion about access and occupancy," he continued. "I just need to ask you a few questions." I didn't interrupt him. I didn't panic. I listened. Because suddenly all those letters, the locks, the quiet changes, they lined up. "I won't take much of your time," he said. "But it's important we clear this up before my visit today." My visit today, I told him the truth. Only what I knew, only what I was sure of. He thanked me, said he appreciated my clarity. When the call ended, I sat there for a long moment, phone still in my hand. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it was Tessa. "Did someone just call you? Darren says there's an issue." I didn't respond right away, not out of spite. Out of respect for the fact that whatever was happening now was bigger than family feelings. This wasn't about who felt welcome. This was about records, agreements, permissions. Less than an hour later, another message came through. "Mom, where are you?" I looked at the clock, then I typed back, "At home." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, someone's coming to the house. Darren's upset. I stared at the screen. Then I set the phone down, because for the first time the tension wasn't sitting in my chest anymore. It had moved. It was sitting in their living room, waiting for a knock on the door. The knock came at 10:17 am. I know the time because Tessa texted it to me later, like the number itself mattered. "He's here." That was all she wrote. I didn't respond, not because I didn't care. Because there was nothing for me to say anymore. From what I was told later, Darren answered the door like he always did. Confident, polite, that practiced smile he used when he thought he was in control. The man introduced himself. Badge visible, clipboard in hand, he asked for access. Darren blinked. Access to what exactly? The man stayed calm. Explained there had been a request filed weeks earlier. A review connected to occupancy, entry permissions, and recent changes to the property. Routine, he said, but his eyes were sharp. Darren told him there must be a mistake. The man asked who lived there. Darren answered. Then the man asked who had access. That's when things slowed down, because Darren hesitated. Tessa stood behind him holding the baby, already pale. The man asked again. Calm, clear. Has anyone else been provided access, keys, or entry codes in the last 60 days? Silence too long. That's when the questions started stacking up. Why locks had been changed. Why access was removed. Why one name appeared in the file but was suddenly being treated like a problem. Darren's voice tightened. He said something about a misunderstanding, something about boundaries. The man nodded, wrote things down, and asked to step inside. That was the moment the panic showed up. Not loud, not dramatic, just visible. Tessa later said Darren kept glancing at the hallway, at the doors, at the keypad by the garage, like the house itself was about to betray him. The man walked through slowly, took notes, asked who authorized the changes. Darren answered, but his confidence was gone now, because authority only works when it's recognized, and this wasn't someone he could talk down to. At one point the man asked if I still lived there. Darren laughed, too fast. No, he said. She never lived here. The man didn't argue, he just flipped a page, and that's when Darren's phone started buzzing. Text after text, missed calls from me, from Tessa's number, from someone else whose name he didn't recognize. The man asked for documentation. Any kind. Darren didn't have it ready. Tessa tried to speak once, quietly. Darren cut her off. That's when the man stopped writing and looked up. Sir, he said evenly, I need clear answers. According to Tessa, the room felt smaller after that, like the walls were listening. By the time the man left, nothing had been resolved, but nothing was dismissed either. He said he'd be in touch. Said further review was needed, said changes shouldn't have been made without proper notice. And then he walked out. No raised voices, no accusations, just consequences hanging in the air. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time it was Darren. I let it ring, because whatever power he thought he had, it didn't reach past that front door anymore, and he knew it. That evening, Tessa finally called. Her voice shook. Mom, she said, can we talk? I closed my eyes, because I knew the next part of this story wouldn't be loud, it would be quiet, and it would change everything. I didn't answer right away when Tessa asked if we could talk. I waited until that evening, until the house was quiet and my thoughts were steady. When I finally called her back, she answered on the first ring. Mom, she said, her voice cracked. I didn't know it would go like this. I didn't rush her. I let the silence sit, because silence had done enough damage already. She told me what happened after the man left, how Darren paced the house, how he checked the locks twice, how he kept asking who I'd spoken to. She said he kept repeating one sentence, they don't have the right, over and over. I asked her one simple question, who's they? She didn't answer right away. That's what scares me, she finally said. That night she stayed up late reading through old emails and paperwork, things she'd never paid attention to before, things Darren always said he'd handle. That's when she noticed dates. My name, my phone number, not as a guest. Not as a problem, but as someone listed for access. Temporary, yes, but approved, documented. She sounded small when she told me. I didn't even know, she said. He never showed me. I believed her. The next morning she called again, this time calmer. She said Darren had taken the day off work, said he needed to fix this. By noon, I got a voicemail from the same man who'd called me before, Greg. He said the review was moving forward, said conflicting information had been provided, said someone would be following up in writing. Clear, neutral, professional, no drama. That afternoon, Tessa came to my house alone. No warning. She stood on my porch with the baby carrier in one hand and her keys shaking in the other. When I opened the door, she broke. Not loudly, just quietly, like she'd been holding it together for too long. I'm sorry, she said. I should have said something sooner. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't ask why she stayed quiet. I hugged her, because whatever Darren was dealing with now, she was dealing with something else. Reality. She stayed for hours. Long enough to nap on my couch, long enough to eat a real meal, long enough to breathe without checking her phone every 5 minutes. When she left, she hugged me tighter. "Can I come back tomorrow?" she asked. I nodded. That evening, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Darren, long this time, explaining, justifying, talking about misunderstandings and intentions. I didn't reply, because explanations don't matter once things are written down. Once someone official is involved, once control slips. By the end of that week, the house on Hawthorne Lane felt different, not because anything had been decided yet, but because the balance had shifted, and everyone involved could feel it. Darren most of all, because the next notice wouldn't come by phone, it would come on paper. And once that happened, pretending I didn't live there wouldn't be enough anymore. The notice arrived 3 days later. Certified, signature required. Darren wasn't home when it came. That part mattered more than he realized. Tessa called me as soon as she saw it sitting on the counter, untouched, like it might explode if she moved it. "He hasn't opened it yet," she said. "He said he wants to wait." Wait for what? I didn't ask. Paper doesn't care about timing. When he finally opened it that evening, everything slowed down, not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, heavy way. Tessa told me he read it twice, then a third time, then sat down without saying anything. No pacing, no phone calls, no anger, just silence. The notice explained that the review had found inconsistencies. That access had been granted, documented, then altered without proper notice. That certain changes made to the property needed clarification. Nothing emotional, nothing personal, just facts. And deadlines. Darren didn't like deadlines. He liked control. That night he barely spoke to Tessa. The next morning he asked her one question. "Did you tell your mother anything?" She told him the truth. Yes. That answer changed something, not between him and me. Between him and her, because once she said it out loud, she couldn't take it back. She spent that day at my house again, longer this time. She brought clothes, baby things, enough to get through the day without rushing back. In the afternoon, she finally told me what she'd been afraid to say. "He said you were overstepping," she whispered, "that you were getting too comfortable." I didn't react, I just asked, "And what did that make you feel?" She swallowed. Like I was watching him do it to me too. That was the truth she'd been circling for weeks. By Friday, another message came through from Greg. Follow-up scheduled. Additional access verification required. Darren tried calling me again. Twice, then 3 times. I didn't block him, I just didn't answer. Because this wasn't a conversation anymore, it was a process. Over the weekend, Tessa stayed with me. Darren didn't come by, didn't ask to see the baby, didn't apologize. He sent one message instead. "We need to talk as a family." I read it once, then deleted it. Families talk when everyone is safe to speak. This wasn't that. By Sunday night, Tessa made a decision, not a big announcement, not a speech. She packed a bag and said, "I'm going to stay here a while." I nodded. No celebration, no relief, just space. The kind space gives you when you're finally allowed to breathe. Somewhere in all of that, Darren realized something too. That the house he thought he controlled came with rules he didn't write. And that the woman he thought he could push out quietly wasn't as temporary as he'd told himself. The next step wouldn't be fast, but it would be final. And it would arrive the same way everything else had, on paper. By Monday morning, the tone changed. Not in the house on Hawthorne Lane, in Darren. He stopped calling, stopped texting. That silence wasn't peace, it was calculation. Tessa noticed it too. She said it felt like the quiet right before someone tries to regain control. Like he was deciding what version of himself to show next. That afternoon, another email came through from Greg. Clear, short, direct. Access verification was confirmed. Previous authorization had not been properly revoked. Next steps would proceed as scheduled, no room for interpretation. That night, Darren finally came by my house. No warning, no message. Just a knock. I opened the door and saw him standing there, hands in his pockets, face tight but calm. The same calm he used when he wanted to look reasonable. "I just want to talk," he said. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, not because I was afraid, because boundaries matter. He started with explanations, how things had gotten confusing, how stress had made him act out of character, how he never meant to disrespect me. I listened, didn't interrupt, didn't argue. When he finished, he waited. Like this was the part where I'd soften. I didn't. "You told me I didn't live there," I said evenly. "And you meant it." His jaw tightened. "I was talking about space," he said quickly, "about structure." "No," I replied, "you were talking about power." That's when his tone shifted just slightly. "Well," he said, "this has gotten bigger than it needed to be." There it was, not accountability, annoyance. I looked at him and realized something. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was upset it had consequences. "I didn't make it bigger," I said. "I just stopped shrinking." That ended the conversation. He left without raising his voice, without apologizing again, without asking about Tessa or the baby, which told me everything I needed to know. Over the next few days, things moved quickly. Meetings, emails, requests for documentation, all handled by people who didn't care about Darren's intentions or his stress level. Only what was written, only what was changed. Only who had the right to do it. Tessa watched it all unfold from my living room, holding her child, finally seeing the pattern clearly. "He always did this," she said one evening. Made me feel like I was overreacting. I didn't answer. She didn't need confirmation. By Thursday, the decision came through, not dramatic, not public, just final. The unauthorized changes were flagged. Access restrictions were reversed. Future modifications would require joint approval. In simple terms, Darren couldn't quietly erase people from that house anymore. When Tessa read the notice, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. He found out later that night. He didn't come over, didn't call. He sent one message: "This isn't over." I read it, then deleted it, because the truth was, for me it was. I had my dignity back, my name back, my place back. And sometimes that's the kind of ending people like Darren never see coming, because it doesn't shout, it just closes the door and locks it properly. After that message, things went quiet in a different way. Not tense, settled. The kind of quiet that comes after the noise finally stops working. Darren didn't show up again. He didn't call. He didn't try to go around Tessa to get to me. Whatever moves he thought he still had, he kept them to himself. And that told me the most, because people who still have power don't go silent, they make demands. Tessa stayed with me through the week. We fell into a routine without trying. Morning coffee, walks with the baby, simple meals, normal. She started sleeping through the night again. One afternoon, she said something that stuck with me. I didn't realize how much I was bracing all the time. Bracing, like she'd been waiting for impact in her own home. That weekend, she went back to the house on Hawthorne Lane during the day, just to get more of her things. I didn't go with her. She needed to do it herself. When she came back, she told me Darren barely spoke. He moved around her like she was a guest. Careful, distant, the same way he'd treated me. Only now she saw it. The following week, another notice arrived. This one confirmed what had already become clear. Any further attempts to change access or permissions without proper approval would carry consequences. Clear ones. Real ones. Darren didn't respond. Instead, he started asking for meetings. To talk things through, to reset. Tessa said no, each time, not angrily, just calmly. "I need space," she told him. And for the first time, she didn't explain herself after. That was new. By midweek, she made a decision. She wasn't moving back, not yet, maybe not ever. She didn't announce it. She just stopped packing. One evening, while the baby slept, she looked at me and said, "I used to think keeping the peace meant staying quiet." She paused. Now I know it just meant I was the one paying for it. I nodded, because that realization costs something, but it gives you yourself back. Darren sent one last message a few days later. Short, you've turned her against me. I didn't respond, because I hadn't turned anyone, I just stopped being the shield. By the end of that week something else happened. Tessa filed her own paperwork, quietly, carefully. She didn't tell many people, she didn't need to. The house on Hawthorne Lane was still standing, still clean, still full of locks and systems, but the power inside it was gone. And Darren felt that, because the people who used to bend around him no longer were. And the woman he once told, "You don't live here," had done the one thing he never planned for. She walked away without asking permission, and took his leverage with her. The final chapter wasn't loud, but it was coming. And it would close everything for good. The house felt different once it was just the three of us. Me, Tessa, and the baby. No tension hanging in the corners, no careful watching of footsteps, no bracing for someone else's mood, just quiet. A few weeks later, Tessa went back to Hawthorne Lane one last time. Not to argue, not to explain, just to finish closing that chapter properly. She took what mattered, she left the rest. Darren wasn't there when she went. That felt intentional, like he knew showing up wouldn't change the outcome anymore. By the end of that month, the paperwork was done, not dramatic, not public, just clean and final. The kind of ending that doesn't give anyone a big speech to twist later. Tessa didn't move back. She found a small place closer to me, nothing fancy, but it felt safe. That mattered more than square footage or appearances. One afternoon, while we were sitting at my kitchen table, she looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "He didn't kick you out," she said quietly. "He showed me who he really was," I nodded. Because sometimes people reveal themselves in the smallest, ugliest moments. A kick, a sentence, a look away. And sometimes the most powerful response is leaving without fighting back. Darren never apologized, not to me, not to her. But he didn't need to. Life adjusted without him at the center of it, and that was consequence enough. As for me, I stopped shrinking, stopped apologizing for taking up space, stopped explaining why I deserved basic respect. When someone tells you, "You don't live here," believe them. Then decide where you do belong and build there. If this story hit close to home, let me know where you're watching from. I read more comments than you think. And if you've been around for a while, you already know why subscribing matters. These stories aren't about yelling or revenge. They're about quiet traps, hidden paperwork, and the moment you realize someone underestimated you. And if this felt familiar, if it reminded you how easily family can say, "It's just a small thing," right before they ask you to carry something heavy for them, there's another story on my channel you might recognize yourself in. It starts with a son, a stack of papers, and a smile that expected obedience. That one taught me something important too. Sometimes the danger doesn't come from strangers. It comes wrapped in family asking for a favor. You'll see it on the screen. I'll let you decide if it feels connected. Thank you for staying with me through this one. I didn't say much back then, but I don't stay silent anymore.